I am sitting in my small office in Seattle, Washington, the computer screen illuminating my face under the cold fluorescent lights. I am Jason Stone, a 37-year-old independent investment consultant, all too familiar with long, endless days where numbers and charts are my only companions. That evening, it had long been pitch dark outside, and the characteristic drizzle of this city was still pattering against the window, creating a dreary symphony. I was focused on analyzing data for a demanding client, my fingers flying across the keyboard, trying to finish the report before the night grew even later. My life is simple, isolated, but I like it that way. No commitments, no drama, at least until my phone vibrated on the desk. The caller ID showed Emmy, my younger sister. Emmy Mendoza, the name I still wasn't used to calling her, even though she had been married for 3 years. My heart skipped a beat. Emmy rarely called me, especially since getting married. Ever since she entered the Mendoza family, our conversations had gradually become sparse. Mostly I was the one reaching out while she avoided them, responding curtly with short messages. She always said she was fine, but her tone carried something distant, as if she were trying to hide a secret she didn't want anyone to touch. I hesitated in surprise, my hands pausing over the keyboard. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm as I answered. Emmy? What's up? Why are you calling? Her voice came through the line, unusually cheerful and excited. Jason, what are you doing? Am I calling at a bad time? She giggled, the sound making me smile instinctively, even though I was filled with suspicion. My Emmy, the little girl who used to laugh and play with me when we were kids, now sounded like someone else. Enthusiastic, radiant, but somehow it felt forced. I replied, glancing at the clock on my computer screen. It's fine, I'm just working. What's going on? It's been a while since you called. There was a very brief silence on the other end. Then she spoke, her voice slowing down. I know. I've been really busy lately, but today I'm calling to invite you to something special. We're having a Christmas party at the villa this year. Come, okay? It's just family, but I want you there. It'll be so much fun. The unexpected invitation made me blink. The villa of Emmy's husband's family, the Mendozas, a wealthy and socially prominent family in Seattle. I had heard about them. Owners of a massive real estate conglomerate, with connections stretching from politics to the financial elite. Emmy had married Brian Mendoza, the eldest son, and from that moment, her life seemed to have entered a different world. I was curious about it, but Emmy always dodged my questions. Is married life treating you well? I had once pressed, and she had only forced a smile. I'm fine, bro, don't worry. Now this invitation, partly because I wanted to see her and partly out of curiosity about the glamorous world she was living in, I immediately agreed. Sure, I'll come. Send me the address, okay? Merry Christmas, little sis. After hanging up, I sat there for a moment, staring out the window where the rain continued to fall relentlessly. A strange feeling arose in me, a mix of joy and worry. Emmy sounded so excited, but why did I still feel that something was wrong? I shook my head, telling myself I was being overly suspicious, and turned back to my work. A week flew by in an instant. Christmas Day arrived, and as in previous years, I had planned to spend it alone with a cup of coffee and a few old movies. But this year was different because of Emmy's invitation. I had already prepared a gift, a simple silver necklace, the kind she loved when she was younger. However, life never goes according to plan. That morning, my office received an urgent call from a client, an unexpected data crash that needed immediate attention. I dove into it, and time passed in a flash. When I finally looked at the clock, it was already late evening. I hurriedly shut down my computer, grabbed my coat, and rushed to the car. On the drive, my heart was pounding. The rain was heavier, and the headlights swept across Seattle's wet streets. I was certain I was late. The party must have started long ago. The address Emmy sent was in an upscale villa district on the outskirts, where massive palace-like homes stood among the trees. I drove through the large iron gate, my stomach full of nerves. From a distance, the Mendoza villa appeared magnificent under the Christmas lights. Twinkling lights covered the entire grounds, a giant Christmas tree sparkling with LED bulbs, and warm Christmas music drifted out. Laughter and conversation filled the air, painting a perfect picture of wealth and happiness. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and told myself, "You're late, but it's okay. Just seeing Emmy will be enough." Stepping into the courtyard, the biting cold seeped through my coat, making me shiver. Through the large dining room windows, I could see about 20 people gathered around a long table laden with food and wine. They were all from Emmy's husband's family and relatives, faces unfamiliar to me, but exuding an air of refinement and confidence. The men wore elegant suits, the women sparkled with jewelry, and they laughed and chatted lively, raising glasses in toasts. The atmosphere was intimate, yet clearly that of an insider circle, one that an outsider like me would find hard to break into. I realized I was the only outsider, and late to boot. Not wanting to interrupt, I didn't walk straight into the dining room. Instead, I quietly sat down at a tea table on the patio, close to the glass windows. From here, I could observe without drawing attention. The cold wind blew, but I didn't care. I decided to wait until the main meal was over before going in to greet everyone, reassuring myself that way. But then what I saw made the blood in my veins boil. Emmy, my little sister, was constantly going back and forth between the kitchen and the dining table. She alone was carrying food, pouring wine for everyone, and clearing dirty plates. There was no seat reserved for her, not even a bite of food set aside for her. Emmy moved silently, head slightly bowed, as if it were a reflex honed from long habit of serving. Her long hair hung loose, her face weary, yet she still forced a strained smile whenever someone called her. The others casually continued their conversations and laughter, treating her presence as a given, like an invisible service machine. No one helped, no one asked how she was. Brian, her husband, sat at the head of the table, joking with his parents, not even glancing at his wife. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms until it hurt. The bitter contrast between the Mendoza family's glamorous facade and the way my sister was being treated, no different from a submissive maid, twisted my heart. This splendid villa, those dazzling Christmas lights, it was all just a superficial shell. Inside, Emmy, the girl who had once been the joy of our family, was being crushed. A wave of discomfort surged through my chest. Simmering anger grew, making me want to burst in and pull Emmy out of there. But I stayed seated, watching. I needed to understand her true place in this family more clearly. Each time Emmy returned to the kitchen, I noticed her back slightly hunched, as if carrying an invisible burden. The laughter from inside echoed out, but to me it sounded like knives cutting into my heart. I wondered, is this the married life she avoided talking about when I asked? Is this the happiness she's living? The wind grew colder, but the rage inside me burned hotter. I clenched my fists tighter, trying to hold it in, but deep down I knew a storm was coming. The anger surged like an underground river, suddenly bursting its banks, dragging with it old memories I had deliberately buried deep in my heart. They came alive vividly, so clear and detailed that I could feel every moment as if time were rewinding itself. I remember the time when Emmy was still in love with Brian Mendoza, her husband now. It was the early days when she had just graduated from college, her eyes sparkling as she told me about the perfect guy she had met at a student party. Brian, the eldest son of the Mendoza family, with his charming smile and fat wallet. I was genuinely happy for her. Emmy deserved happiness after the hard years our family had endured, our parents working tirelessly to raise us two siblings in a small house on the outskirts of Seattle. But then, the first meetings with the Mendoza family planted a vague unease in me. I still remember the time Emmy brought Brian home for dinner. He behaved politely, shaking my hand firmly, but his eyes slowly scanned our modest living room, carrying an emotion hard to name. It wasn't overt contempt, but a cold, appraising look, as if he were assessing the value of the place and the people in it. Later, when they invited us to their villa for an intimate meal, everything became clearer. The Mendoza family, Mr. and Mrs. Mendoza, their siblings and relatives, greeted us with polite smiles, but their eyes lingered on Emmy's ordinary clothes, on the slightly awkward way she held her knife and fork compared to them. "Where are you from, Emmy? What does your family do?" Mrs. Grace Mendoza asked, her voice sweet but loaded with implication. Emmy smiled shyly and told them about our father being a mechanic and our mother a nurse. They nodded, then moved on to talk about their trips to Europe and massive investments, as if reminding us that we belonged to a different world. Those seemingly polite words, to me, clearly hid contempt for the working-class background of the Stone family. I remember very clearly one time when Mr. Mendoza turned to my father and said lightly, but with deep meaning, "Oh, a mechanic? Hard work, isn't it, but stable?" My father, Reed Stone, just nodded slightly in response, but I clearly saw his hand gripping the water glass so tightly that his knuckles turned white. My mother, Elisa, tried to smile politely throughout, but her eyes betrayed a sadness she couldn't hide. And Emmy, my little sister, avoided my gaze the entire meal, as if she were ashamed for dragging the whole family into a world that wasn't ours. Afterward, Emmy would only casually mention that she didn't fit in at her in-laws' parties. "I'm not used to those fancy dishes, bro," she said, her tone light as if it were no big deal. But I understood it was more than that. It was her way of hiding the feeling of being looked down upon, of being repeatedly reminded that she wasn't in this position because she deserved it, but because she was lucky. They had even said it straight to her face that she was lucky to have met Brian, as if Emmy were some bargain Brian had picked up off the street, rather than a person with her own worth. The memories shifted to the wedding day, a day I once thought would be the pinnacle of her happiness. The ceremony took place at the most luxurious hotel in Seattle, with imported fresh flowers and a live orchestra. But from the start, everything felt off. Not just Emmy, but my parents and I were placed in an awkward position. Our seats were far from the center, in a secluded corner, as if we were secondary guests. Meanwhile, the Mendoza family sat in the front rows, laughing and chatting lively with their distinguished guests. The questions comparing careers and money served as a way to remind us of our true place. "How many years have you been a mechanic? Is the income steady?" one Mendoza relative asked my father, in a tone as if speaking to a servant. Dad stayed silent, just nodding, but I saw his face flush red. Mom forced a smile at the half-joking, half-sarcastic remarks. "Elisa, you're so lucky to have a daughter who married my son. We're used to grander weddings, but simple is nice too." Mrs. Grace said that, and everyone around laughed along. I clearly remember the moment my mother silently forced a smile, her hand clutching the napkin until it wrinkled, and Dad quietly left early, citing fatigue, carrying his wounded pride without a word. He didn't want to ruin Emmy's big day. I stayed, trying to smile, but filled with unease. Emmy in her pure white wedding dress looked like a fairy, but her eyes flashed a hint of sadness when she glanced toward us. The flood of memories was abruptly interrupted by a loud crash from inside the dining room. I startled, my eyes glued to the glass. Emmy, while carrying a full tray of food, had unfortunately tripped. Several salads and cold cuts spilled everywhere onto the floor. She quickly bent down to clean up, her hands trembling as she picked up each piece, like a fear response etched deep into her bones. Her face was pale, eyes downcast, mouth murmuring apologies nonstop. My heart tightened. This wasn't the first time, I was sure of it. She moved like a robot programmed to endure, not daring to lift her head. Mrs. Grace Mendoza, Emmy's mother-in-law, stood up, holding a glass of gleaming red wine in her hand. She looked at Emmy with cold eyes and let out words of reproach laced with sarcasm. "Oh my God, dear daughter-in-law, how could you be so careless? You've ruined the whole party. Or perhaps you're just not used to such elegant things." Her voice was sweet but sharp as a knife. Everyone around fell silent. The atmosphere at the table froze for a few brief seconds. I held my breath, waiting for someone to defend her, but no one did. Mrs. Grace raised her glass, then slowly poured the red wine straight over Emmy's head, in front of everyone. The red liquid ran down her hair, dripping onto her face, soaking her Christmas red dress. The frozen atmosphere lasted only a moment before it was broken by bursts of laughter. "Mrs. Grace, you're too funny," someone said, and the whole table erupted in laughter, as if it were just a harmless joke not worth worrying about. They resumed chatting and toasting as if nothing had happened. Brian, Emmy's husband, not only failed to stand up for his wife but frowned and scolded her. "Emmy, what are you still standing there for? Hurry up and go back to the kitchen to prepare something else. Don't keep everyone waiting." His voice was ice cold, like he was speaking to a servant. No hug, no words of comfort. He turned away, joking with his relatives, as if Emmy were just a stain that needed wiping away. Emmy silently wiped the wine from her hair and face, her trembling hands dabbing with a napkin, hiding the tears that were about to fall. I could clearly see through the misty glass her shoulders shaking slightly. She bowed her head even lower, left the dining room, and disappeared behind the kitchen door. My heart shattered. This was the limit. I froze for a moment, then could no longer hold back. The anger exploded. My body reacted before my mind could. I stood up abruptly, ready to charge in, kick through the glass door, and pull her out of that hell. But right at that moment, the dining room window opened. A few men standing nearby, Mr. Mendoza and two relatives, were chatting while smoking cigars, laughing heartily. The darkness outside meant they didn't notice me just a few meters away. I froze, my body rigid. They couldn't see me, but I heard every word clearly. "Profits are great this year," Mr. Mendoza said, his voice warm but full of smugness. "No need to go the usual route. Money comes fast and steady as long as you know how." I held my breath, listening intently. The conversation flowed smoothly, brimming with arrogance. They mentioned enormous profits, but not directly, using the kind of language only those accustomed to shady dealings would understand, dealings that never appeared on paper. One laughed contemptuously, saying bypassing checkpoints was no big deal. Just be accommodating a little, and auditors would stay quiet. Any troubles were already taken care of in advance. The casualness in their tone sent chills down my spine. They discussed manipulating the system, covering tracks as if recounting a familiar joke played out too many times. Then Mr. Mendoza concluded, exhaling a puff of cigar smoke into the night air, his voice firm and arrogant. They would never have to pay for anything. In that instant, I realized I was facing something much larger. This wasn't just a powerful and cruel family, it was a rotten system, a criminal nest cloaked in the glamorous veneer of wealth and influence. My anger was no longer just for Emmy. It was bigger, deeper. I sat back down, my heart pounding wildly. The storm had arrived, but now it took a different form, a storm that could sweep everything away. I sat there in the darkness of the garden, the cold wind slapping my face like invisible blades. My heart was pounding, the rush of blood in my ears drowning out even the Christmas music drifting from inside. The words of Mr. Mendoza and those other men still echoed in my head. Off the books profits, bypassing checks with money, never having to pay the price. As an investment consultant, I recognized those signs all too well. This wasn't a joke nor empty boasting. It was financial fraud, money laundering, perhaps even worse. The Mendoza Group, on the surface, a legitimate real estate empire with gleaming skyscrapers in downtown Seattle. But beneath it all, what were they? A criminal network, using money to bribe officials and cover up wrongdoing. I shuddered, not from the cold, but from a mix of fear and excitement. Excitement. Yes, because now I had a weapon. But the fear was greater. If they knew I had overheard, what would happen to Emmy? To me? To our family? I tried to breathe deeply, forcing myself to calm down. The rain still pattered on the eaves, mingling with the heavy smell of cigar smoke wafting from the open window. Those men were still standing there, laughing heartily, completely unaware that a stranger was listening to every word. I glanced through the glass and saw that Emmy had not yet returned to the dining room. She was probably in the kitchen, cleaning up, trying to swallow her tears. The anger on her behalf still boiled inside me, but now it was blended with a far greater worry. This wasn't just a family that looked down on the poor. They were dangerous people who could crush anyone who got in their way. Then, as if fate wanted to test me further, one or two more men approached the window area. I recognized them. One was Brian's cousin, the other a business partner I had seen in the press, always appearing beside Mr. Mendoza at charity events. They joined the conversation with familiar ease, without any attempt to hide or be cautious. No furtive glances, no whispers. They slapped each other on the back, lit fresh cigars, and continued as if they were in complete privacy. "So, how's it going this year? Profits still good?" Brian's cousin asked, his voice loud. Mr. Mendoza smirked. "Good? Better than good. We pulled in $150 million from the East Side project alone. The market's tough for everyone else, but not for us." My heart beat faster. They bragged about enormous profits earned over the past year, emphasizing that their projects were thriving despite the real estate market plummeting due to inflation and recession. "Everyone else is struggling with high interest rates, but us, still growing 30%, the partner chimed in, his voice full of smugness. They rattled off figures: $200 million from construction contracts, $80 million from underground stock investments, and other amounts I couldn't keep up with. It was as if economic fluctuations didn't apply to them. This wasn't generic cocktail party boasting. These were real numbers, real results, spoken with the confidence of people long accustomed to facing no consequences. They talked as though the law was a joke, and they were the ones who wrote it. I held my breath, straining to catch every word. The conversation quickly revealed its true nature when they openly discussed using money and connections to interfere with oversight processes. The IRS auditors? Already taken care of. 50 grand and they shut up, Mr. Mendoza said, followed by a guttural laugh. Files get approved easily, violations get overlooked. Questions that should have been asked never come up. The cousin nodded. Remember last year's project? We routed the money through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, then brought it back as legitimate investment. No one asked a thing. They laughed as they talked about how every trace had been carefully hidden, treating their ability to manipulate the system and escape legal accountability like a trophy rather than something terrifying. Our lawyers are the best. One phone call and it's done, the partner boasted, exhaling cigar smoke into the night air. Each word they spoke was like a puzzle piece falling into place, and the complete picture emerged before my eyes. I heard enough pieces to realize this was no longer suspicion or intuition. It was a full portrait of systematic illegal activity. Money laundering through real estate, bribing officials to bypass tax audits, concealing illicit profits. The Mendoza Group wasn't a legitimate business. They were a criminal organization using power to distort the law. My heart pounded like a drum, cold sweat running down my spine despite the biting wind. Excitement surged. If I stayed silent, they would continue, and Emmy would remain trapped in that hell forever. But if I acted, what would the consequences be? I glanced at the phone in my pocket, thinking of Luis Navarro, my closest friend from college, now a special agent investigating financial crimes for the Internal Revenue Service. Luis, with his sharp mind and unwavering integrity, had once told me about the major cases he handled. You know, Jason, sometimes it just takes one small piece to bring down an entire empire, he had said during a night of drinking. I couldn't sit still any longer. Quietly moving away from the tea table, I retreated deeper into the garden's shadows where the trees provided cover. My hands trembling, I pulled out my phone and dialed Luis. The ringtone dragged on and I prayed he would pick up. Jason, why are you calling at this hour? Merry Christmas, man. Luis's voice came through, warm but laced with suspicion. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, but the words poured out like a flood. Luis, listen to me. I'm at the Mendoza house, my sister's in-laws. I just overheard those guys talking. They were bragging about massive profits from real estate projects, but not through legitimate channels. They're bribing IRS auditors, hiding traces through shell companies. The company name? Mendoza Holdings, mainly real estate and financial investments. They talked about bypassing controls with money and connections. 50 grand for silence, routing money through the Caymans. I recounted everything I had just heard. The company name, Their field of operations, how they described the profits and evading oversight with bribes and influence. I gave details, from the 150 million figure to the way they laughed when talking about manipulation. Luis was silent for a moment, then his voice turned grave. "Hold on, Jason. Are you sure? This isn't a joke." I affirmed firmly, "Absolutely sure. I heard it crystal clear." Luis sighed, then revealed, "We've had preliminary suspicions about this family before. Their records are too clean, traces wiped almost perfectly. Not enough evidence to dig deeper. But what you're telling me, it matches the scattered pieces we have. Abnormal profits, connections to officials. This time, your information is enough to connect the dots into a complete chain. I'll report it to my superiors right away. But be careful, Jason. Don't let them know." The call ended, but my heart was still racing. I pocketed the phone, inhaled the icy air deeply, trying to compose myself. Returning to my spot by the tea table, I sat down, my expression calm again. From the outside, I looked like a late-arriving guest waiting for the right moment to enter. But inside, turmoil was raging. I knew that a door had just been opened, and this Christmas party would never end the way it was supposed to. It would spread, dragging the entire Mendoza family into the whirlwind of justice. I glanced through the glass and saw the men still laughing and talking, their cigars glowing red. They had no idea. The tension rose. What would Luis do next? Would they be arrested? And Emmy? What would happen to her when everything collapsed? I sat there in the darkness of the garden, trying to calm myself. My heart was still racing wildly, adrenaline surging through my veins. The call to Luis was like a time bomb I had just armed, and I was the one who lit the fuse. But now I had to play the part, a harmless, late-arriving guest. The rain had eased, leaving behind a damp, chilly air. Inside the dining room, the laughter and conversation began to quiet down, replaced by the clinking of dishes. The main meal was winding down. People were standing up, stretching, and moving toward the lighter tea and dessert portion of the evening. Through the fogged glass, I could see Emmy still busily cleaning up, silently wiping the table. She bent down to pick up scattered food scraps, her hands polishing the already gleaming surface, her face weary yet striving to maintain a composed expression. A wave of injustice and heartache surged through me like a violent tide. She had never been treated as part of that party. Not a single bite of food, not a single toast in her honor, just a serving shadow. How had she endured it? For how long? I clenched my fists, nails digging deep into my palms until it stung, but that physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I suddenly remembered the old days when Emmy was still the little girl who sat at our family dinner table, laughing carefree with Mom, Dad, and me. Those meals were simple but strangely warm. Mom always made the roast she loved, and Dad told his awkward jokes that made the whole house burst into laughter. And now, looking at the present, Emmy was here, in this lavish villa, surrounded by lights and sophisticated voices and laughter, yet more alone than ever. The anger over what I had overheard from those men still smoldered, but now it blended with the deep sorrow I felt for Emmy. I couldn't sit still any longer. As the tea gathering began, everyone moving to the sofa area holding cups of tea and pastries. I decided it was time to step inside, presenting myself as the genuinely late guest. I took a deep breath, smoothed my rain-dampened coat, and pushed open the glass door into the dining room. The atmosphere inside was warm, filled with the scents of food and wine, a complete contrast to the cold outside. Christmas music still played softly, lanterns twinkling on the enormous tree in the corner. I smiled, trying to appear natural, as if I had only just arrived and witnessed nothing. "Sorry everyone, I'm really late," I said loudly, my voice feigning cheerfulness. "Year-end work was hectic. I couldn't get away sooner. Merry Christmas." I offered that excuse, hoping it sounded convincing. Mrs. Grace Mendoza turned around, flashing a polite smile. "Oh, Jason, right? No problem at all. Come in, come in. We've just finished eating." Mr. Mendoza nodded, still holding his cigar, but his eyes swept over me quickly as if I were an unimportant guest. The others responded with a few perfunctory words, appearing polite and friendly on the surface, but their attention swiftly returned to their interrupted conversations. Someone resumed talking about a trip to Europe. Someone else joked about the stock market. My presence didn't truly matter, just a minor interruption. I maintained a courteous demeanor, suppressing the turmoil churning inside me. I didn't want to arouse suspicion or create tension. I chatted briefly with a few people nearby. One relative asked about my work, and I gave a short answer about investment consulting, cracking a couple of light jokes about market volatility. But in my mind, I was thinking about the shady figures they had just boasted about outside the window. They laughed and sipped their tea, but to me it was all a hollow facade. My heart beat faster, the tension mounting. What would happen if they knew I had heard everything? I glanced around and saw Brian lounging on the sofa, chatting with his relatives, not sparing a glance for his wife. And Emmy? At that moment, I noticed her quietly slipping back into the kitchen, staying away from the social area. She kept her head down, carrying a tray of dirty dishes, disappearing behind the kitchen door like a familiar ghost. This was my chance. I seized the opportunity by excusing myself to find the bathroom and left the gathering. "Excuse me, where's the restroom?" I asked someone nearby, then followed the directions, but in reality I headed toward where Emmy had vanished. The hallway led to a large, brightly lit kitchen, still heavy with the lingering smell of food. I gently pushed the door open and stepped in. Emmy was standing there alone, her back to me, washing dishes at the sink. Her shoulders trembled slightly, and I heard a faint sigh. My heart twisted. "Emmy," I called softly. She startled and turned around, eyes wide with surprise. "Jason, when did you get here? What are you doing in here?" Her voice quivered as she forced a smile. I closed the kitchen door, stepped closer, and looked her straight in the eyes. I couldn't hide it anymore. "Emmy, I've been outside the whole time. I arrived late and sat in the garden watching through the glass. I saw everything that happened during the party." The words spilled out, my voice low but firm. I recounted it briefly. Seeing her serve alone, the spilled food incident, the wine poured by Mrs. Grace, everyone's laughter, and Brian's failure to defend her. Emmy panicked, her face visibly paled. Her eyes widened and she clutched the dish towel until it crumpled. "You saw everything? Oh, God!" She backed away, leaning against the counter, her voice trembling with fear. "Please don't make a big deal out of it. I'm begging you. They'll retaliate. You don't know. My marriage is so fragile, if you speak up, everything will collapse." Emmy blamed herself, her voice choking. "It was my fault. I was careless, and one small mistake made everything worse. I'm begging you, pretend you didn't see anything. Just forget it, please." She grabbed my hand, her eyes glistening with tears, pleading like a frightened child. I could clearly see the fear in my sister's eyes, not just of Mrs. Grace or Brian, but of losing the fragile happiness she was desperately clinging to. Seeing her like that tore my heart like a knife. Emmy, the once strong, dreamy girl, was now trembling before me, taking the blame for things that weren't her fault. I wanted to hug her, to shout that it was all wrong, that she deserved so much better. But I nodded, painfully agreeing to stay silent. "All right. I won't say anything. I promise." Those words brought visible relief. Her shoulders relaxed and she managed a weak smile. "Thank you. You're the best brother." She turned back to the dishes as if everything were fine again. But Emmy had no idea that in my mind, a different path had quietly taken shape. The call to Luis was never the end. It was only the beginning. I knew I could no longer stay silent, not just about what had happened at tonight's party, but about the far greater secrets hidden behind it all. Thoughts of the future made my heart pound. The investigation wouldn't stop at the surface. Layer by layer would be peeled away. Evidence would emerge, and the Mendoza family, with all their arrogance, would have to face an inevitable downfall. Emmy might finally be free. But what price would the truth demand? I wasn't sure. I stepped out of the kitchen, my chest heavy with both hesitation and resolve. The storm had been unleashed, and from that moment I knew no one, not even I, could turn back anymore. The weeks following Christmas passed in a persistent state of tension, as if time were deliberately stretching to test my patience. I returned to my daily routine in my small office in Seattle, analyzing investment charts, meeting clients, but my mind was always elsewhere. Every morning I checked my phone with a tight chest, waiting for a message or call from Luis. He kept his promise. Discreet updates came regularly, but always shrouded in absolute silence. No emails, no texts, just brief late-night calls when the entire city was deep in sleep. "Jason, listen to me," Luis would often begin in a low, almost whispered voice, as if speaking any louder might alert someone. "We're digging deeper. Don't worry, everything's still airtight." I listened in the darkness of my bedroom, gripping the phone tightly, trying to keep my voice calm in response, while inside I was a tangle of emotions, anxiety, excitement, and the sense that the gears had started turning and there was no way to stop them anymore. My Christmas night call had become the most crucial piece, like a time bomb no one had anticipated. Luis told me that the information I provided, the abnormal profit figures, the way they boasted about bypassing audits with money and connections, had helped the investigation team pinpoint their direction clearly. Previously, they had only vague suspicions about Mendoza Holdings, but the records were too clean, like a seamless steel wall. Now, with the specific details from me, they could precisely target the projects and entities to scrutinize. "That East Side project they mentioned, it's the key," Luis whispered in one call. "We trace the money flow from there, and damn, it leads to so much." I imagined his team, sharp-eyed IRS agents sitting in brightly lit offices poring over data for hours. Excitement surged every time I thought about it. What would they uncover next? One small mistake by the Mendozas could bring down the entire empire. Records once deemed too clean began revealing anomalies like cracks on a thin sheet of ice. Money flows were traced backward, layers of cover systematically peeled away. Luis updated me step by step. First, tax audits of subsidiary companies, then tracking international transactions through the Cayman Islands. I sat in my pitch-black apartment, heart pounding as I pictured agents flipping through files, connecting the dots into a complete criminal picture. Opaque profits were uncovered, enormous sums that didn't match official reports flowing from shady real estate contracts. Illicit money streams through multiple shell companies were successively frozen for investigation. I remember one midnight call. "Today we locked 3 intermediary company accounts. They're panicking, but they don't know why yet." Entities registered under associates and middlemen collapsed one after another, dragging along a series of suspended contracts and projects. Luis said that as the noose tightened, some partners began talking to save themselves. Some didn't even wait for deep interrogation before cooperating voluntarily. "A partner in New York spilled everything," Luis said. "He revealed how the Mendozas bribed auditors. The whole system is starting to come apart." I shuddered, thinking of Mr. Mendoza, the smug man with his cigar, now sitting in his luxurious office, unaware that the machinery of justice was closing in. The tension grew as I imagined the scene. Massive construction projects in Seattle halted, workers confused, shareholders whispering. I checked the news daily, but nothing had surfaced yet. Everything remained silent, like the gathering clouds before a storm unleashes. Then suddenly, like a bomb exploding, information leaked to the public. It was on a drizzly morning while I was drinking coffee and scrolling through the news. A small article in the Seattle Times. Suspicions of financial fraud at Mendoza Holdings. My heart pounded. The press jumped in immediately. Investigative pieces appeared in rapid succession, raising major questions about the origins of their wealth and the company's operations. Reporters dug deep, interviewing former employees and analyzing public financial reports. "Luis, what's going on?" I called him right away. "Internal leak, probably. But it helps us. Public pressure will force them to slip up." I followed every article, filled with a mix of worry and excitement. Headlines grew increasingly sharp. The Mendoza dynasty, an empire built on sand, mysterious profits and shady connections. The tension rose as I imagined the family reading those lines, their faces turning pale. The market reacted fiercely, swiftly, and ruthlessly. Shareholders panicked and dumped stock. The company's value plummeted in a short time. I watched the flashing charts on my computer screen. As Mendoza Holdings stock plunged from its peak to the depths in just days without a single rebound, Luis kept updating me. They've lost billions already. Banks are pulling funding. No one wants to be associated anymore. The Mendoza family, once celebrated as a model of success, fell straight into crisis. The media turned en masse, portraying them as a sophisticated fraud network. Long-standing business ties were quickly severed. Everyone distanced themselves as if no connection had ever existed. Chairman Mendoza, Emmy's father-in-law, along with key executives, were successively summoned by authorities. Luis recounted it concisely but firmly. They've been called in by the IRS. Interrogations lasting days. The evidence is solid. Documents, testimonies, everything matches. I couldn't help picturing the scene. Mr. Mendoza in a cold interrogation room trying to maintain his usual composure while question after question and file after file were placed on the table, piling up with no room left for denial. Formal charges were quickly announced: systematic tax evasion, financial fraud, long-term concealment of money flows. The case moved to prosecution with trial dates set one after another. The press exploded with sensational headlines. The Mendoza scandal, billions in fraud. I followed every development. Each new report made my heart race faster, filled with both tension and the feeling that the wheel had rolled to a point of no return. The case went to federal trial with heavy charges. Documentary evidence and testimonies swiftly exposed the directing role of the Mendoza family leadership. Defense lawyers tried, but in vain. The court handed down severe sentences. Key leaders received prison terms. Mr. Mendoza got 15 years. Brian and his siblings didn't escape either, along with massive fines. The corporation faced crippling financial penalties. Many assets were seized: the villa, luxury cars, bank accounts. Shell companies were forced to dissolve, leaving a mess behind. In the public eye, the image of an exemplary, wealthy, and powerful family collapsed completely, revealing the rotten core beneath the glamorous facade they had meticulously built over years. The press called it the scandal of the century, and Seattle buzzed. But I felt no satisfaction or triumph. What weighed on me was a sense of emptiness and unease, realizing I had just pushed a massive gear into the machinery of justice, with no way to stop it anymore. Every night I lay awake thinking about Emmy. Would she hate me? I remembered her pleading in the kitchen, "Please don't make a big deal out of it." Now everything had become bigger than ever. The storm had swept through, but it left behind in me a vast emptiness. I had saved her, but had I really? In the days following the verdict, my life seemed to return to normal. My office, clients, numbers dancing on the screen. But inside, I was like a walking corpse. I avoided contacting Emmy, partly out of fear of touching her still bleeding wounds and partly out of self-blame. Luis called one more time to congratulate me. "You did great, Jason. Thanks to you, I cracked a major case." I forced a smile, hung up, and sat alone in my darkened apartment, watching the rain fall outside the Seattle window. I imagined Emmy alone in the villa that had surely been seized by now, facing the ruins. Brian was probably in prison. Mrs. Grace was silent before the press. And her? I didn't dare ask. Then one ordinary day, while I was in my office focused on an investment report for a major client, my phone vibrated. I answered in my usual voice. "This is Jason Stone. Who's on the other end?" A cool, professional female voice replied, "Mr. Stone, this is Harborview Hospital. We're calling about your sister, Mrs. Emmy Mendoza. She was brought into the emergency room in a severe state of distress. You're listed as her emergency contact, correct?" My heart stopped. I froze for a few seconds, mouth agape, unable to speak. My mind spun. "Emmy, What happened to her? I stammered. Yes, I'm her brother. What happened? Is she okay? The voice remained calm. We can't discuss details over the phone. Please come to the hospital right away to get the full picture. I hung up, my hands shaking as I grabbed my coat and rushed out of the office without explaining to anyone. On the drive to the hospital, a dazed fog enveloped me. My mind went blank. Rain pattered on the windshield, streetlights blurred, but I saw nothing. Only the image of Emmy pleading in the kitchen on Christmas night replayed over and over. Was this because of me? The storm I had unleashed had swept everything away, but now it had taken her too. When I arrived, I parked hastily and ran into the Harborview lobby, the strong smell of disinfectant hitting my nose. I asked at the reception desk, my voice trembling. My sister, Emmy Mendoza. Where is she now? They directed me and I rushed to the emergency room. Through the glass door, I saw Emmy lying motionless on the hospital bed, eyes closed, her face deathly pale under the harsh white lights. Her skin was ashen, her hair disheveled, and the heart monitor beeped steadily. My heart twisted, my feet felt rooted to the spot. I didn't dare approach immediately, afraid that even one step might shatter everything. Emmy, the little girl who once ran and laughed carefree, now lay there, fragile as a withered leaf. I asked myself, is this the consequence of what I did? Guilt surged, choking my throat. A middle-aged doctor in a white coat stepped out and pulled me aside to a quiet corner. You're Mrs. Mendoza's brother? I'm Dr. Ramirez. Your sister was brought in suffering from severe emotional distress. We examined her and she miscarried. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. My sister had a miscarriage. When was Emmy pregnant? I stood stunned, stammering, miscarriage. When was she pregnant? Why did she miscarry? Dr. Ramirez looked at me with sympathy. She was about 12 weeks along. To stabilize her mentally, we had to administer sedatives because she fell into a state of extreme agitation, screaming and crying uncontrollably. I nodded mechanically, but my mind reeled. Emmy was pregnant, and now she had lost the baby. How could this happen? Before leaving, the doctor added in a lower voice, one more thing, Mr. Stone. She has multiple bruises, both old and new, whose location and severity don't suggest ordinary accidents. We've reported it to the authorities, but you should know. Those words struck like lightning. Bruises? Not accidents? That meant she had been abused? I stood speechless, watching him walk away without reacting. I thanked the doctor absent-mindedly, my voice hoarse, then returned to her bedside. I sat down beside Emmy, my trembling hand taking hers, ice-cold and limp. A sense of helplessness and heartache squeezed my chest, making it hard to breathe. Emmy lay there, eyes still closed, breathing steadily thanks to the medication. I looked at the faint bruises on her arms. Who did this? Was it Brian or someone else in the Mendoza family? The old anger rose, but now it mingled with excruciating pain. I whispered, Emmy, I'm sorry. I'm here now. Tears rolled down my face, but I wiped them quickly, not wanting her to wake and see her brother weak. When she woke a few hours later, Emmy gradually became aware of the loss of the child inside her. Her eyes opened drowsily, then suddenly widened in panic. Jason, where's my baby? Why can't I feel anything? Her voice broke. She clutched her stomach, tears streaming like a flood. Emotions exploded. She sobbed hysterically in terror, her body shaking violently, screaming incoherent words. I could only hold her, repeatedly comforting, Emmy, calm down. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. But even to me, the words sounded hollow. She cried until exhausted, then fell asleep in my arms. My heart ached as if cut by a knife. Was this the price of justice? Losing a child, breakdown, and those mysterious bruises? In the days that followed, I practically lived at the hospital, caring for Emmy in every small way. I took emergency family leave from work. For meals, I brought homemade chicken mushroom soup from home, spoon-feeding her bit by bit. To the nights she jolted awake from nightmares. Emmy often woke in the middle of the night screaming, dreaming of blood and Mrs. Grace's laughter. The shock of losing the baby severely damaged her mental state. She blamed herself. "It's because I wasn't more careful. I should have protected the baby better." She lived in fear and guilt, always worried that it wasn't over. "They'll come back, bro. They'll get revenge." I tried to encourage her. "It's not your fault. It was an accident, and I'll protect you." But I gradually realized my words of comfort weren't enough to pull Emmy out of the haunting shadows surrounding her. She looked at me with empty eyes as if her soul had left her body. Throughout those hospital days, no one from her husband's family appeared. No Brian, no Mrs. Grace, no Mr. Mendoza. Their absence cut like a silent knife, but I noticed and chose to stay quiet. I didn't dare ask, afraid that one careless question might cause her fragile spirit to collapse again. Unanswered questions swirled in my mind. Had they abandoned her, or were they simply busy dealing with their own troubles? Anger boiled, hot and sharp, but I suppressed it, forcing myself to focus on the person lying before me. During the day, I sat by her bed, telling old stories, trying to cling to warm memories. Of afternoons when we played hide and seek in our small garden. Of times she laughed so hard she forgot to eat. But Emmy only nodded faintly, her gaze drifting far away, as if those memories belonged to another life she could no longer reach. In the nights alone in the hospital corridor under cold fluorescent lights, I could only silently watch Emmy's breathing through the slightly ajar door. The steady beeps of the monitor echoed, mingling with sighs from other patients. I carried a heavy feeling, realizing there are pains a brother cannot ease merely by being present. I blamed myself. If I hadn't called Louise, maybe she would still be pregnant, still living in hell, but at least with her child. Or would she? What did those bruises mean? Long-term abuse? Anxiety surged, making me want to scream. Tension about the future. Would Emmy recover? Or would this pain consume her? I sat there, head bowed, tears falling silently. The price was too steep, not just for the Mendozas, but for us. The days in the hospital dragged on like an endless nightmare. I became a shadow by Emmy's bedside, watching her every small movement. Dr. Ramirez came to check on her daily, his voice always gentle but laced with concern. "She needs time, Mr. Stone. Severe psychological trauma combined with physical loss. It won't be easy." I nodded, but doubt filled my heart. Each time Emmy woke, she looked at me with empty eyes, as if her soul had wandered off somewhere among the painful memories that hadn't yet closed. I tried telling her happy stories, reminding her of those long-ago summer days when we were kids, chasing butterflies in our grandparents' garden, sunlight pouring warmly over our shoulders. I hoped those fragments of memory might pull her back to the present. Emmy gave a faint smile, one so fragile it nearly vanished the moment it appeared. It never reached her eyes. She turned her face away, gazing out the window where Seattle's rain fell steadily, relentlessly, as if the whole city were quietly weeping in her place. At night, when the hospital sank into silence, I sat in the corridor, my mind swirling with what-ifs. If I had acted sooner, maybe she wouldn't be suffering like this. Or if I had stayed silent, would everything have continued? The price of justice. I thought I had paid it, but now I realized Emmy was the one bearing the heaviest burden. Tension rose every time I thought about the day she would be discharged. Where would she go? How would she face the outside world where the press was still buzzing about the Mendoza scandal? Finally, that day arrived. Dr. Ramirez signed the discharge papers and gave careful instructions. "She needs plenty of rest, Mr. Stone. Schedule regular psychological follow-ups, and let her speak when she's ready." Emmy sat on the bed wearing the sweater I had brought, her face still pale but her eyes a little brighter. I asked softly, "Where do you want to go now? Back to your husband's house?" Emmy shook her head vigorously, eyes wide with fear. "I can't go back there. I just want to go home to Mom and Dad for a while, to get a change of air." Her voice trembled, but it was resolute. I looked at her and saw a spark of life returning. Not the submissive bride anymore, but the old Emmy, the girl who dared to decide. I didn't press further, just nodded. All right, I'll take you home. My heart tightened. Home, the small house on the outskirts of Seattle where we grew up. It was a safe place, but also full of memories. I wheeled her out to the car. The drizzle continued, the cold wind piercing through our coats. The long drive home was silent. Neither of us spoke a word. A heavy atmosphere filled the car, broken only by the patter of rain on the roof and the faint late Christmas music on the radio. I glanced at Emmy in the rearview mirror. She stared out the window, arms wrapped around her stomach, eyes distant. The usual 2-hour drive felt endless. Every minute was torment. I wondered, does she suspect me? Or does she still think the Mendoza collapse was random? When we arrived, the familiar small wooden house with its white fence appeared under the dim streetlights. Our parents, Reed and Elisa Stone, were already waiting at the door, worry evident but forcing smiles. Mom stepped forward first, pulling Emmy into a tight embrace, whispering reassuringly, "You're home now. Just rest. Don't think too much right now. You have Mom and Dad here and your brother. No one will pressure you to talk or do anything." Dad stood beside us, placing a hand on my shoulder, his eyes red but steady. "Thank you for bringing Emmy home, Jason. You've been through a lot." No one rushed to ask questions, no one probed what had happened. As I helped Emmy inside, Dad added slowly, his voice deep and firm, "This house will always be your home. Stay as long as you want. Be silent if you need to. Just know you're not alone." Emmy nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks, but this time without panic, only relief after a journey far too long. I took her to her old room, the one with faded rose-patterned wallpaper, where she used to sit for hours drawing and dreaming. Emmy lay down on the bed, exhaling as if releasing a heavy burden, then turned to me with a weak but sincere voice. "Thank you for bringing me here." I smiled back, trying to appear calm, while my heart remained weighed down by things I couldn't yet say. That evening, family dinner unfolded in an indescribable atmosphere, both subdued and warm. Mom made Emmy's favorite roast. Dad told a few awkward jokes to break the silence. We sat around the old wooden table, golden lamplight glowing down. I noticed Emmy starting to speak a little more, though still cautiously. "Mom's roast is still as delicious as ever," she said, her voice soft but genuine. I sat watching, heart filled with hope mixed with worry. She ate slowly, occasionally glancing at us as if checking whether this was real. No one mentioned the Mendozas, the trial, or the lost child. It was an unspoken rule. Let her breathe. But in my mind, questions swirled. When would she be ready to talk? And what would I say about my role? Night fell. After our parents went to bed, the house sank into quiet, broken only by wind against the windows. I couldn't sleep and went to the kitchen for water when I saw Emmy sitting alone at the table, staring blankly as if trapped in inescapable thoughts. She held a glass of water, hands trembling, gazing into the darkness outside. My heart tightened. This was the moment. I approached gently. "Emmy, you're not sleeping. Is something still bothering you?" She startled, looked at me, then lowered her head. I sat across from her and waited. "Can I ask you something? About the bruises the doctor mentioned. I've never dared ask directly, but now I'm so worried about you." Emmy was silent for a long time, looking at me as if weighing something, eyes glistening. The air grew tense. Anticipation rose. Would she speak or close up again? Finally, she sighed and began in a weary, fragmented voice. "Ever since her husband's family started falling apart, all the blame was poured on me. They saw me as the bringer of bad luck, the reason everything collapsed." Her voice choked. She gripped the glass tightly. I sat frozen, listening to every word. Emmy continued. "Brian became more controlling and violent. He forbade me from contacting anyone, even you and Mom and Dad. Whenever he was angry, he took it out on me with beatings. I lived in fear for so long, too afraid to ask for help. I thought if I endured it, things would get better. The worst was a violent argument when Brian's rage spiraled out of control. He shouted, called me a traitor because the scandal broke after you came to the Christmas party. I tried to get away, but he grabbed my arm and yanked hard. I slipped and fell down the stair, and then I lost my baby. Her words broke. Tears poured out. I was numb with pain, realizing she had silently endured far too much in isolation, and that I, her brother, had failed to see it sooner. Those bruises weren't the first. It had been prolonged hell, and I had been blind. My heart twisted, my own tears fell. Emmy, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were going through that. But the words felt meaningless. She wiped her tears, voice small. I don't blame you, I'm just tired. In that quiet late night, as Emmy's words still echoed in my mind, I was tormented fiercely. For the first time, I wondered if my earlier decision had gone too far beyond my control. The call to Louise. I thought it would save her, but now it had led to the loss of her child, to this pain. Tension rose. What if she learned I was the one who started it all? I sat there at the table, watching her fall asleep in the chair, heart full of unease. The house was warm, but the storm inside me still raged. The decision was right, but the consequences were immense. I carried her to bed, tucked her in, then sat alone on the porch, staring at the hazy stars. The torment didn't fade. It made me want to scream. Emmy had told her truth, but what about mine? When would I dare to tell it? In the days that followed, the small family home became a fragile sanctuary for Emmy. She gradually regained a bit of vitality, waking earlier, helping Mom with housework, even joking lightly with Dad about little things. But I could clearly see that behind those smiles were long silences, moments when she sat alone gazing into the garden, her hands unconsciously cradling her stomach. I watched from a distance, my heart full of worry. At every family meal, we avoided mentioning the Mendozas, the trial, or the lost child. Our parents skillfully steered conversations toward happy memories. Remember when Emmy painted that birthday picture for Dad? It was awful, but I still have it hanging up. Emmy would smile, but a flicker of sadness crossed her eyes. I sat there, eating without tasting anything, my mind churning with the secret gnawing at me. Her confession from the previous night was like an open wound. Brian's beatings, the blame, and the fateful fall down the stairs. I knew that if I continued to stay silent, the distance between us would grow, misunderstandings piling up. I realized I could no longer keep this secret if I wanted to face Emmy honestly. It wasn't selfishness, it was necessary. The truth, even late, was better than prolonged silence, no matter how much it might shatter everything. I waited for the right moment, but it never came easily. It happened one evening, a few days after Emmy returned home. Our parents had gone to bed early. The house was quiet, broken only by crickets in the garden and the whisper of wind through the windows. I couldn't sleep and went to the kitchen to make coffee when I saw Emmy sitting alone at the table again, just like the night before. She held a cup of cold tea, staring into space as if wrestling with herself. I approached and sat across from her, my voice soft. Emmy, you're not sleeping? I have something I need to tell you. She looked up, eyes slightly narrowed in suspicion. What is it, bro? About Brian? I don't want to talk about it anymore. I took a deep breath, clenching my hands under the table to stop the trembling. In a prolonged moment of hesitation, I looked at her, her gaunt face, the dark circles still under her eyes, and decided, not to justify myself, but because I believed keeping the secret would destroy us from within. Emmy, I was the one who provided the information to the authorities. The words spilled out, my voice low but steady. I told her everything, from the beginning. Christmas night, sitting in the garden, overhearing Mr. Mendoza and the men talking about illegal profits, bribes, and cover-ups. Then the call to Luis, my friend at the IRS. I heard them bragging about manipulating the system, and I couldn't stay silent. I thought it was the way to save you, to bring down that rotten family. Emmy froze for a few seconds, eyes wide, lips slightly parted as if she couldn't comprehend what she had just heard. Then the silence shattered. Her face flushed red. Her hands gripped the teacup so tightly I could hear the porcelain strain. "What did you just say?" she asked again, voice low but trembling. "Repeat it." You were the one who reported them." Before I could answer, her anger exploded. "You betrayed me, Jason," she shouted, her voice breaking with fury. "How did I beg you? Have you forgotten? I told you how terrified I was. I pleaded with you not to make it a big deal, not to touch them. I needed you to understand, not judge." I stood frozen, my heart crushed. Emmy shot up from her chair, pointing straight at me, tears streaming uncontrollably. "You destroyed my family," she screamed. "Your decision pushed everything out of control. You took away my unborn child. Do you even realize that?" I opened my mouth to speak, but she didn't give me a chance. If it weren't for that scandal, Brian wouldn't have gone insane like that. I wouldn't have lived in fear. I wouldn't have fallen. I wouldn't have lost my baby. She let out a bitter laugh through her tears, a twisted smile full of despair. "You thought you were saving me. No, you only made everything worse." Every word stabbed straight into my chest. In her frenzy, she continued, voice hoarse. "Do you know how scared I was? Every day walking on thin ice. I begged you to stay silent, Jason. I just needed you beside me, not deciding my life for me." I looked at her, pain so intense I could barely breathe. I wanted to say I only wanted to protect her, that I had seen her treated like a servant, that the Mendoza family was a criminal nest. But I realized in Emmy's eyes at that moment there was no room for reasons or good intentions. She didn't see justice. She only saw the pain I had brought. I still tried to take a step forward, voice faltering. "Emmy, please listen to me just once. I couldn't stand by while they did that to you. I did it all because I love you, because I couldn't bear seeing you tormented." She screamed, pushing me away hard. "Don't say another word. Don't justify it." She shook her head violently. "You think you know everything? You think you have the right to decide what's best for me? You pushed me straight into this hell." Her voice tore through the quiet night, mingled with uncontrollable sobs. Bedroom doors flew open. Our parents rushed out, faces shocked. Mom ran to hold Emmy, voice trembling. "What's happening?" "Calm down. Tell me." Dad looked at me, eyes full of confusion and worry. "Jason, what on earth is going on?" But Emmy had completely lost control. She struggled out of Mom's arms, tears flooding her face, pointing at me and screaming, "He's the cause. He destroyed everything." Then in despair, she turned and ran out. I shouted, chasing after her. "Stop. Don't go like this. Let me explain." But she ran faster than I expected. The back door burst open, cold wind rushed in, carrying the smell of damp earth and thick darkness from the garden. In seconds, she vanished. I stood stunned. Emmy was gone, in panic, without a word, without a trace, and I realized I had just lost her in the most terrifying way. The whole family frantically searched through the night. Dad grabbed a flashlight and ran to the main road. Mom called neighbors for help. I plunged into the garden, shouting her name among the dark bushes. My heart pounded wildly. Cold sweat broke out despite the freezing night. We searched for hours, from familiar streets to the nearby park, but no one knew where she had gone. Only growing dread remained like a time bomb in my chest. When we returned home, it was very late. Rain began pattering down. Our parents sat at the kitchen table, faces exhausted and anxious. Mom cried, "Where could she have gone? It's so cold." Dad put a hand on my shoulder. "Stay calm, son. We'll find Emmy." But I sat numb in the silence, overwhelmed by guilt and torment that nearly brought me to my knees. I buried my head in my arms on the table, tears falling uncontrollably. Even as our parents stayed beside me, trying to console, "Jason, it's not your fault. Emmy's just distraught." The words didn't reach me. I blamed myself. Why did I tell her? Why didn't I wait? Tension rose over where she might be, alone in the night, panicked, perhaps wandering somewhere. The house now felt like a prison, and I was the one who caused it all. The pain made me want to scream, but there was only the endless rain outside the window. That night stretched on endlessly, each passing minute a torment. Our parents finally dozed off exhausted on the sofa, but I couldn't sleep. I got up, pacing the house, staring out the window into the darkness that swallowed everything. My phone vibrated constantly in my hand. I called Emmy over and over, but only endless ringing met me, then voicemail. "Emmy, please come back." "I'm sorry. Call me, okay?" I whispered into the phone, my voice hoarse. I pictured her running in the rain, clothes soaked, tears mingling with the downpour. Was she cold? Was she safe? Tension surged like violent waves, making my heart pound wildly. I recalled the moment she turned and fled, her small figure vanishing into the night, footsteps pounding on the wet ground. Why couldn't I catch up? Why didn't I stop her? The quiet house now felt suffocating. Every corner reminded me of her, the chair she sat in, the unfinished cup of tea on the table. After hours of continued searching, we had called the police, reported her missing, and they promised to patrol the area. I received a call from an unknown number. My heart tightened as I answered. A familiar female voice, trembling. "Jason? It's Jenny, Emmy's best friend. I found her." Jenny, the college friend of Emmy's I had met a few times, sounded deeply worried. "She's been taken to the hospital in critical condition. I happened to see her in the park near my place. She attempted something extreme. Luckily, a passerby noticed and called emergency services in time." The words struck like lightning. Extreme act? Did she mean suicide? I froze, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. "Which hospital are you at now? How is she?" I stammered, voice breaking. Jenny gave the address, Harborview again, the same place she had been for the miscarriage. I woke our parents, explained quickly, then rushed to the car, driving through pouring rain, headlights sweeping over wet streets. Tension rose to the point of breathlessness. Was she still alive? Why did she do it? Because of me? Because the pain was too much? When I arrived at the hospital, I ran into the lobby. The familiar smell of disinfectant hit like a punch, a cruel reminder. Dr. Ramirez, the one who had treated her before, was waiting, face grave. "Mr. Stone, your sister is out of immediate danger. She attempted self-harm by overdosing on pills, but we performed gastric lavage in time." I collapsed inside, seeing Emmy once more on a hospital bed, realizing her flight into the night wasn't just escape, but a sign of a spirit pushed to its absolute limit. She lay there motionless, heart monitor beeping steadily, face paler than ever, eyes closed under sedation. I stood outside the glass door, feet rooted, tears streaming down. Was this the consequence of the truth I revealed? She, the once strong, dreamy girl, now lay there, nearly leaving this world because the pain was unbearable. My heart twisted, guilt surged like a tidal wave. I blamed myself. If I had stayed silent, maybe she wouldn't have reached this point. Or if I had told her sooner, would things be different? Tension about the future made me tremble. Would she wake up? And if she did, how would she look at me? After passing the critical phase, Emmy was moved to intensive psychological monitoring and intervention. The doctors assessed her as suffering severe depression due to prolonged trauma, from domestic violence, the loss of her child, to the shock of my confession. "She needs intensive therapy, Mr. Stone," the psychologist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Hale, told me. "This isn't her first breakdown, but this time it's serious. We'll help her open up and confront it." I nodded, but my heart was filled with unease. In the early days, Emmy was in a state of panic, reacting violently to my presence. When I tried to enter the room, she screamed, "Get out! Don't come near me!" Her eyes were full of anger and fear, hands clutching the bedsheets until her knuckles turned white. I froze, stepping back, heart aching like it was being cut. She rejected every approach from me as if I were the source of all her pain. Dr. Hale advised, "Give her space. She's processing complex emotions. Anger at you, but also at herself." I accepted, stepping back, keeping my distance, only quietly handling hospital bills and necessary procedures. I signed papers, paid invoices, arranged therapy schedules, but no longer entered the room. I let our parents care for Emmy directly. Mom sitting by the bed, stroking her hair, telling old stories. Dad bringing flowers and books, trying to make her smile. I stood in the corridor, looking through the glass, heart full of sorrow. Tension rose every time I thought, would she forgive me? Or would this distance be permanent? In those days, I lived like a shadow, going home only to sleep, then returning to the hospital, waiting for updates from our parents. She talked more today, Mom texted. But to me, she remained an unfillable void. The initial therapy sessions progressed slowly and with much resistance. Dr. Hale said Emmy was silent at first, refusing to speak, only crying or staring out the window. She's suppressed too much for too long. Violence from her husband, pressure from his family, the loss of her child, and now the feeling of betrayal from her brother. I nodded, guilt surging. But little by little, Emmy began to voice the things she had bottled up for so long. In the sessions, she talked about the fearful nights with Brian, how she blamed herself for not being good enough, how the pain of losing her child felt like punishment. Dr. Hale updated, she's making progress, starting to realize it wasn't her fault. Gradually, Emmy became more lucid and stable, recognizing that her guilt and self-blame weren't solely hers, but the result of long-hidden traumas. She began keeping a journal, drawing abstract paintings full of dark colors at first, but gradually brighter. Still, Emmy maintained distance from me, no longer rejecting harshly, but not yet ready to face or speak directly, as if she needed more time to sort her own emotions. I understood. She was building walls to heal herself. Tension surged every time I thought about the moment of confrontation. What would she say? Forgiveness? Or resentment? I sat in a cafe near the hospital, watching the rain fall, questioning my decisions. Justice had come, but the price was the fracture between us siblings. When she was calm enough, after several weeks of therapy, Emmy decided to divorce. No longer out of anger or flight, but as a necessary choice to save herself. She called a lawyer, signed the papers, her voice resolute when telling Mom, I don't want to be tied to the past anymore. The process unfolded in silence. The Mendoza family made no attempt to hold on, no reaction, no apology or acknowledgement of responsibility. Brian from prison signed through his lawyer as if she had never existed. That silence, instead of causing more hurt, helped Emmy completely sever the final tie to her painful past. She exhaled in relief upon receiving the divorce papers. For the first time since marrying, I saw Emmy make a decision for herself, not to please others or out of fear. From the corridor, through Mom's accounts, I pictured her signing, eyes brighter, shoulders straighter. A flicker of hope sparked in me. She was choosing to live. Though the road ahead remained full of challenges, ongoing therapy sessions, finding a new job, rebuilding a life from the fragments, Emmy had chosen to live. She chose to confront, to start over, slowly but with her own will. I saw her gradually change. Emmy began walking in the hospital garden each afternoon, carrying a thin book, sitting for hours under the trees. Once she drew a small painting to give Dr. Hale, lines still shaky but focused. I heard from Mom that she had said very softly but firmly, she wanted to take up painting again. I stood outside all of it, glad, moved but not daring to approach. In my heart lingered one unanswered question. When would she be ready to talk to me? Would she ever see the protective intent behind my decisions, or was the crack between us too deep to mend? The family home now became a place of healing for her, but for me, it remained shrouded in unnamed shadows. I only knew one thing for certain. Emmy was alive, and at this moment that mattered more than anything. I waited patiently, hoping one day she would call my name again, without anger, without fear, just like the old days. After all the turmoil, I realized I was carrying too much torment and obsession, not just because of what had happened, but because of the feeling that I had lost control over the consequences of the decisions I had made. Every night, lying alone in my Seattle apartment, I would see the image of Emmy running into the rainy night, her cries echoing in my head like an unending, painful melody. I wondered, had I truly pushed her to the brink? The call to Luis, at the time I thought it was the right thing to do, the way to save her from the Mendoza hell, had now become a haunting shadow. The consequences rippled outward endlessly. The empire's collapse, Brian in prison, Emmy losing her child, and then the near suicide. I could no longer control anything. The machinery of justice turned, but it swept up the people I loved most along with it. That sense of helplessness gnawed at me day by day, keeping me awake at night, staring at the dark ceiling with tears streaming down. I was no longer the strong Jason, the protective big brother. I was just the man who had ignited the storm and now had to witness its wreckage. I couldn't live like this forever. After countless sleepless nights, I proactively sought psychological therapy. Not to justify myself or escape, but to learn how to face the guilt, helplessness, and fear that had been silently eroding me for so long. I remember the first session with the therapist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Thompson, in a small, cozy office with a soft sofa and the faint scent of lavender essential oil. "Mr. Stone, what brought you to therapy at this time?" she asked gently. I sat there, gripping the armrest tightly, then poured it all out. The Christmas night, the call to Luis, the confession to Emmy, the night she ran away, and the hospital. I thought I was saving her, but now she almost died because of me. I can't control it anymore. Dr. Thompson listened without judgment, only nodding. "That's a very heavy burden for one person to carry. But you're not a superhero, Mr. Stone. You're just a human, with limits, emotions, and choices that are never perfect." The early sessions were difficult. I cried a lot, shouted in anger at myself, but gradually I learned to breathe, to analyze my emotions. She helped me realize that guilt doesn't always mean wrongdoing. Sometimes it's simply part of the healing process. Therapy helped me slowly understand that some things can be right yet still painful, and what I needed wasn't to punish myself, but to learn to live on in a healthier way. "You did what you believed was right to protect your sister," Dr. Thompson said in one session, "but consequences don't always follow our intentions. Forgive yourself, Jason." Those words were like a ray of light piercing the darkness. I began applying it, keeping a journal every night, listing the good things from the day, no matter how small, like a good cup of coffee or a satisfied client call. I learned to accept that not everything is in my hands. Life is a chain of decisions, and consequences sometimes exceed our control. Gradually, the obsession faded, though it remained like a scar. I no longer lay awake all night. Instead, I slept more deeply, even if dreams still occasionally brought images of Emmy crying. Step by step, I returned to my familiar rhythm, focusing on work, keeping myself busy without running away anymore, learning to accept the necessary silences. My Seattle office became a refuge again. I dove into investment data analysis, met clients, even joined a running club to release stress. Mornings started earlier. I ran along the riverbank in the light Seattle drizzle, sweat mingling with rainwater running down my collar as if each footstep washed away a bit more of the burden I carried. When my lungs burned and my heart pounded, I felt clearly that I was still alive, not just surviving day to day. I also stopped avoiding silence. Instead of burying myself in work until exhaustion, I allowed myself to sit quietly by the window, watching the city drift slowly through the gray rain, letting thoughts of the journey naturally rise and settle. In one session, Dr. Thompson told me calmly but firmly, "You're making progress, Mr. Stone. You're no longer running away. You're living, not just trying to survive." I nodded, understanding what she meant, but when I stepped out of the therapy room, the familiar tension returned, clinging to me like a shadow. I wondered if Emmy was taking similar steps. How was she now? Were there mornings when she woke without the past pulling her backward? I had no answers, and perhaps the only thing I could do now was keep moving forward, slowly enough not to abandon myself, and patiently enough to wait for the day she was ready to step closer to me. Emmy moved back to live with our parents in a safer, more peaceful environment. The small family home, with its backyard vegetable garden and the sound of roosters at dawn, became the place where she slowly recovered. I occasionally received calls from our parents telling me my sister was smiling more, talking more, and gradually regaining her old liveliness. "Today she helped me bake, laughing the whole time," Mom said in one call. "She started painting again, Jason." I listened, heart filled with warmth mixed with sorrow. "Has she asked about me at all, Mom?" I asked quietly. Mom sighed. "Not yet, but I see her looking at family photos a lot. Emmy needs more time." I nodded over the phone, tension rising. She was healing, but what about the crack between us? Those calls were like medicine, reminding me she was alive, progressing even if slowly. On weekends, I still made time to visit home. Simple meals and everyday conversations gradually replaced the heavy silence of before. Driving back, the familiar road now carried a different feeling. Not overwhelming worry, but fragile hope. Family dinners, Mom's vegetable soup, Dad's stories about fixing the fence, Emmy sitting there listening, occasionally adding a joke. At first, she avoided eye contact, only nodding when I asked, "Are you doing okay these days?" But gradually, we siblings slowly opened up more, not forcing the past, but learning to listen and accept each other's emotions step by step, forgiving the wounds that hadn't yet healed. One afternoon, we sat on the porch watching the sunset over the garden. "Bro, today I painted a picture of the sea," she said softly. I smiled. "Can you show it to me?" Not digging into old memories, just small moments like that, rebuilding the bridge. On one visit, Emmy took the initiative to talk, for the first time apologizing and acknowledging that she now understood everything. I came from wanting to protect her and do what was best for her. It was one evening after dinner when our parents had gone to bed early. We sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from hot teacups. Emmy looked at me for a long time, eyes red but calmer than before. She spoke slowly, as if gathering all her courage. "I'm sorry, bro, for yelling at you that day. I was so angry I couldn't control myself. I only saw my own pain and didn't see that you were scared too and worried for me." She took a deep breath and continued, "Back then I thought you had destroyed everything. I thought you took away my family, took away my child. But now, looking back, if it weren't for you, I might still be trapped there, still enduring and convincing myself everything would be okay eventually." Those words fell like a stone lifted from my chest. I froze for a few seconds, then gripped her hand tightly, voice hoarse. "No, Emmy, I'm the one who needs to apologize. I thought I was strong enough to handle it all, wise enough to control the consequences. I didn't foresee the price you would pay. If I had known it would go this far." I choked up, unable to finish. "I'm sorry for not protecting you in a safer way. Sorry for causing you more pain, even though I only wanted you to be free." Emmy shook her head, gently squeezing my hand. "I've come to understand it all. It really hurt, but some truths, if left unspoken, would make the pain last forever. And now, I no longer blame you." I didn't argue or try to explain further. For the first time, I understood that healing doesn't come from who was right or wrong, but from both of us finally seeing each other's fear at the right moment. We sat in silence for a long while. Then Emmy let out a soft laugh over something small and ordinary. I laughed with her. The tension inside me gradually melted away, giving way to something warm, fragile but real, something I had feared I would never touch again. That Christmas, I was once again caught up in work and arrived home late, just like the year before. Driving back, light rain fell. The wet streets reflecting lights made my heart beat faster than usual. I was both hurried and anxious, not knowing if, when I appeared, things would still feel strained, or if Emmy had truly left the anger behind. When the house came into view at the end of the familiar road, Christmas lights glowed softly in the yard. I stepped inside to find our parents and Emmy still sitting around the prepared table, no one impatient or reproachful for my delay. The small tree in the corner twinkled simply, but enough to fill the house with warmth. "I'm home. Sorry everyone for keeping you waiting so late," I said, voice trembling more from emotion than fatigue. Emmy stood up, walked over, and hugged me naturally, lightly. "We were all waiting for you. Mom and Dad said we should wait until everyone's here to eat and enjoy." In that moment, I knew I had truly come home. The meal unfolded in a cozy, peaceful atmosphere. No longer glamorous or ostentatious, just the sense of belonging I once thought I had lost. We ate Mom's roast, told old stories, laughed over small things, raised glasses to wish each other a peaceful new year. No one mentioned the Mendozas. No one mentioned the past. Only laughter rang out in the small house, enough for me to understand that some things once healed no longer need to be named again. In that moment, sitting in the familiar kitchen, looking at the simple meal before me, I suddenly reflected on the entire journey. I realized family was never a place without wounds or mistakes, but a place where people still choose to return, to stay, and to learn to heal each other after the breakdowns. I saw Emmy's smile, saw our parents sitting there with rare, peaceful eyes, and for the first time understood that we hadn't run away. We had chosen to stay even after pain that once felt unbearable. From everything that happened, I carried a lesson that was far from easy but necessary. Justice can be important, sometimes inevitable, but justice alone isn't enough to save a person from collapse. What helps us survive loss, regret, and torment is compassion and understanding, for each other and for ourselves. Right and wrong aren't always the answer, and not every victory brings peace. And if there's one final message I would give to myself and to anyone trapped in silence and endurance, it is this: don't hesitate to seek help when you need it. Learn to set boundaries at the right time. Learn to say stop before you're worn down to exhaustion. No relationship is worth trading your mental health and safety for. Choose to live, choose to face it, and choose to heal. Sometimes that is the greatest courage a person can muster.